will hurt you," he said in the slow, careful cadence that marked him as a foreigner. Maura did not have to see her sister's face to imagine the bruises. It made her heart surge with hate again. Hate against the boss who had seduced Angela with a promise of marriage and then kept her in his room as if she were his slave. Maura's chest began to heave, not from effort this time, but from everything else. Her hate, her shame that at this moment she felt jealousy, and most of all, her fear. Her cheeks puffed out as she pressed her lips together to hold back the tears. What had they done? They were in so much trouble. Suddenly she felt Pyotr's hands on her shoulders. "It will be all right," he said, looking into her eyes. "We aren't going to the canals because we don't want the body to move when they open the locks. We don't want anyone to find it." She wished her eyes were blue like his and Angela's. She wished he would stay there forever, touching her, caring for her. She nodded as he took 2 bundles of clothes from the cart and left them with Angela in the dark. Then he signaled to lift the cart's poles once more as they rolled it to a deserted section of the bassin. Marcel Barbereau, who had been so hot-blooded, silver-tongued, and tempestuous in life, had become stiff, heavy, and mercifully silent in death. Even so, the monster moved as they took hold of him. A rigid arm jerked upward under the sheet they had torn from his filthy bed. Maura thought she would faint. Pyotr froze, then composed himself. He even smiled, for Maura again. "A revolutionary must get used to death," he said, although his rasping voice and trembling hands belied his bravado. Yes, that's all she, the girl he called bold and brave, managed to utter. As if of one mind, they swathed the corpse more tightly then, shaking a bit and cringing. Maura helped Pyotr lift Marcel Barbereau out of the cart. Counting 1, 2, 3 under their breath, they swung the body into the water. She closed her eyes until she heard the splash. It was only right that the dense, hard muscles the bastard had used on her sister would sink him into the deep. Yet the sinking seemed to take forever, and when they finally sensed his disappearance under a rippling disturbance of the calm waters, a chill coursed through her body. Damp with the sweat of June heat and terror's cold, Maura tasted the nausea erupting in her belly. But she had to suppress the bile. She had to be brave, act the part, be a boy, or a man, like Pyotr. Maura stood by the cart as Pyotr went back to get Angela. Suddenly, a tall, thin man emerged with quick, definite strides from the very street that they had taken to the bassin. Maura crouched down behind the cart and watched, peeking between the spokes of a wheel. She saw her sister recoil as the intruder noticed her and tipped his hat. Maura held her breath as Pyotr approached them. When she saw Pyotr thrust out his hand in greeting, she allowed herself to breathe again. "A friend. Maybe he is a friend," she whispered to herself. Still, she clutched the wheel, praying that he'd go away. At last, he gave a wave and started to stroll in the direction of the canals. Shaken, but relieved, Maura slid into a hard seat on the cobblestones. She did not move until Pyotr beckoned her. "Come," he whispered. "Who was that? What were you talking about?" she asked as she struggled to her feet. "Someone who comes to our cafe. I had to talk to him. He wanted to meet Angela because he thought she was my girl," Pyotr said, as he laid a calming hand on her shoulder. "He even asked about the dark-haired girl who comes to listen to me make my little speeches. I told him I didn't know where you are, and I don't," he said, smiling, "since you have become a strong, brave boy." Maura thrust his arm away. She was not in the mood for one of Pyotr's gentle jokes. "How can you be sure he is not a police spy? Didn't you tell me they haunted all workers' cafes? Maybe he saw us, maybe he—" This time Pyotr took her hand as he peered into her eyes. "I have seen his wounds. He was injured at the gasworks. He is a worker who is learning about his oppression. Soon he may become one of us." Maura shook her head at the pride she heard in Pyotr.